Hello and welcome to our course, Introduction to Language and Linguistics, Humanities 160. My name is Tiffany. I'll be your instructor this semester. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet any of you tonight, but I'm looking forward to meeting you next week, Tuesday. So we'll get started here. We'll breeze through some of what we were going to talk about in class, and then we can come back and review. And if you have any questions, we'll talk about that on next week, Tuesday. So, linguistics is just the scientific study of language, and that's really what we'll be doing. We'll look at things like how language processes in the brain, and the different little components of language, like the sounds, how we form vowels inside our mouths, and then how those sounds come together to form words and sentences, and how we diagram things to create proper syntax in different languages. And I just want to invite you to come along on this journey and sample a little bit of linguistics. It's kind of like a buffet, you won't have high quality items necessarily because we can only, sample little bits and pieces of all the subfields of linguistics, but you can see what you like and then come back for more if you're interested. So we'll meet Tuesdays from 5:15 till 8, and please remind you to attend every class since we only meet once per week. If you do miss a class, you'll be missing out on quite a bit. We'll usually be in MAC 204, but do note that we moved to MAC 237 on April 9th. And then I'm hoping that I can find out from you next week why you decided to take this course, because I'm interested to hear about your backgrounds and how I might be able to cater some of our lessons and discussions to what you really are looking for out of this coursework. So we'll jump into some of the most essential questions that we're trying to get at throughout the entire course. One has to do with abstract mental structures that relate words to one another. Okay, so what's really going on when we're forming a sentence? How does our brain make that all work? And then what's universal about languages? Specifically having to do with how people acquire first and second languages, and you'll see there is a universality to that. How languages vary across time throughout history, and then across space, so looking at different regional and social dialects. And then finally, how language influences the way we think about others around the world. So my teaching philosophy is pretty simple. I'm hoping to take the knowledge that you already have, and most of you can relate to this course since we all speak a language. So taking that knowledge and then building off of it and helping you make connections to create new knowledge about language. I strive to keep things positive, hold your attention, keep things fun. Start with where you're at as opposed to coming at it from the discipline of linguistics. I want to really meet you in the middle. I'm going to ask for some commitments and offer some of my own, which we'll do next. And then I also want to engage you in some critical thinking and offer diverse learning experiences. So that's what you should expect from me this semester. As for those commitments, please read all of the chapters and complete all the assignments before each class. We'll talk about that more in a moment when we look at the syllabus. I, in turn, will commit to prepare engaging, high-quality learning activities. I ask you to attend every class and participate in all of these activities, and then I will make that worthwhile for you and create that welcoming learning environment. Please submit high-quality assignments on time, and then in return, I'll provide clear expectations for you and prompt quality feedback. If you have any concerns about these commitments, please do bring it up with me either in class or by email or after class. So in a nutshell, basically, you have to show up, right? We all have to show up. We all have to bring something to the table. Listen to each other, not talk over each other. Actually take time to listen and then reason and reflect upon what we're learning from each other. And finally, care, right? This isn't the kind of class you necessarily want to take just, because you have to. It's actually something that I hope will encourage you to think about how you can use what you've learned to make the world a little bit of a better place. And we'll get into that in more detail as we go along. So let's talk about the nitty gritty. What will you be learning here? In weeks 3 through 6, so not next week, but the week after, we'll start with the components of linguistics. And they start at the basic sound level. So week 3, you're going to be looking at phonetics and phonology. So that's phonetics is speech sounds, and then phonemes I like to think of as the letters that correspond to those sounds. Excuse me. Week 4, we'll be looking at chapters 5 and 6, which have to do with morphology or the word level. So looking at the different parts of words and how they hold their own meaning. Week 5, we take another step back and we look at phrases and sentences. And then finally, after syntax, we move to semantics and pragmatics. That's week 6, and we'll look at meaning. So literal meaning of phrases and sentences, and then meaning in context. Again, week 3 is phonetics, phonology, week 4, morphology, week 5, syntax, and then week 6, semantics and pragmatics. I know those words might feel a bit foreign to y'all right now, but they will clear up as we go along for sure. There are tons of subfields in linguistics. So we talked about some of the basic ones, and then all around the outside of this figure you can see there's sociolinguistics, anthropological linguistics, philosophical linguistics, stylistics, which has to do with literature, computational linguistics, which is a whole really interesting field on its own. We don't get into too much, but if you would like to research this for your paper, that's something you can certainly do. Applied linguistics, which is where I live, teaching language, psycholinguistics, and I think we talked about sociolinguistics. So all of these subfields, well, not all of them. Most of them we'll touch on at some point. So we'll talk about philosophy in chapter 1, biology later on, psychology, languages, history, sociology, anthropology, and more. And for your paper, the sky's the limit. You can choose anything you want, but try to choose something that you care about for some reason. Either, you're majoring in this area, or you're hoping to find a career related to something, or it's just it has to do with something you care about in your personal life. And then learn enough about your topic by researching it in order to teach us something. So that's what we'll come back to, and we'll talk more about that right now. So your research paper is your first paper. It is going to be 700 to 800 words, which doesn't include the reference list. And then you can choose any topic related to language. And I'll give you some more guidance on choosing a topic in a bit. There's a template available on D2L. You can also use the Purdue OWL website, and I think I've got some links to that on D2L for examples of how to cite your sources correctly. I'll ask you to read over the rubric, and I'll show you where that is. And then you'll have opportunities for peer and instructor feedback to improve your paper along the way. You'll also be working with somebody else, at least one other person, 2 to 3, groups of 2 to 3, to create an oral presentation. And you'll look for common themes, things you found as you did your research, and create a short, cohesive, and entertaining presentation for us all that's between 5 and 10 minutes. So we were going to do this in class, but I'll just give you a moment to think of as many languages as you can. I'm thinking Spanish, German, French, Italian, Arabic, Chinese, Mandarin, the list goes on and on. How many languages do you speak? I speak 2. I speak English and Spanish. I speak a tiny bit of German. Maybe can understand more than I can actually say. And then take a moment to think about how we would typically define language. Most people say it has something to do with a means to communicate, right? But I would encourage you to take a moment to go to this presentation. You can find it on D2L and watch from about 2 minutes and 20 seconds on how this guy defines language. And it really kind of opens your mind to some other types of languages that we might know. We won't be doing this right now, but you can do this on your own if you like. And then when we meet again next week, you'll be submitting an index card with your name, the typical languages you speak. I told you I speak English, Spanish, and a little bit of German. And then after you watch the TED Talk, maybe we'll have time to do it in class, you'll understand what he's talking about when I say something like a language of pride, something you speak fluently, or a language of pain that you speak fluently, or a language that you want to learn or improve. And your index card will look something like this. So this is a little bit of extra homework, just asking you to think about, those different languages outside of the typical languages we think of. Languages of experience is what he calls them. So my language of pride is that I'm a wanderlust, right? I've been traveling around a lot, and I feel like I've become a better person for it. I have a unique perspective that I love to bring back with me into the classroom and share with everybody. A language of pain, very personal, very hard thing to talk about, but for generations, my family, especially the women in my family, have dealt with mental illness and depression, myself included. And so just opening up about that is tough, but it's something that I think if I'm going to ask you to open up about a language of pain that you speak fluently, I should share one of mine as well. And then a language I'd like to learn more about. We hear this buzzword sustainability thrown around a lot, but what does that really mean? And why do we use language like sustainability? It has such a positive undertone. I'd like to learn more about that. And then you'll bring these notes to class, and we'll consider the languages that we wrote down and meet with each other. And we'll talk about, what are our different languages, and hopefully be able to find a partner for our presentation. So we'll finalize our topic and find a partner, and all of that we'll do in class next week. So don't worry too much about that. We were going to try to do it today, but we'll do it next week. So you'll introduce yourself to somebody else in the class, share the languages you wrote down. I would say, hi, I'm Tiffany. These are my languages of pride, pain, and one I want to learn about. And then I'd write down any names of people who had something similar. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. And then we get to research process. I'm going to save this for next week. So this is just a preview of what we'll be doing in class. I also only have a couple minutes left, but I do want to just briefly look at, there we go, D2L. So you can read over your announcement for today. Hopefully you got that. You can go to Amazon to purchase your book. I think it'll come in about a week or two. Otherwise, you can get it at the bookstore. There we go. The content tab is where you can find just about everything. Under overview, you can look at the syllabus. Please do read through the syllabus carefully. My preferred method of communication is email. Office hours are actually going to be held in the Common Grounds coffee shop. You can take a look at how you'll be graded. Please do take time to read through all of this, and we'll review it in class again. This is the grading scale, and then this will be exactly what your grade will look like. There won't be any rounding up. This is the class calendar, so you can see that already next week we'll be looking at chapters 1 and 2, so I'm hoping you'll have time to read over those 2 chapters in your book, and we'll decide your paper topic by the end of class next week. And the rest you can look over at your leisure. So Dropbox is where you'll enter some of your papers, grades. I think everything's pretty self-explanatory. I'm running out of time. And I'll see you next week.